Anybody who makes meme videos does not get extra credit. I'm just putting it out there. Although I did end up hiring that one guy who did as a TA when I was working at the university, but and he was a really good TA. But anyway, so
Nick.
no.
He's gonna have to edit.
I see many familiar faces.
Nick, you're gonna have to edit some of this because if I'm speaking.
Is it working?
Oh yeah, it's working, but I'm just saying it's gonna pick up everything that I'm saying, and I tend to swear a lot.
Yeah,
so.
if you're okay with that, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. You might need to go in and do some cutting. And
Oh, I do absolutely no editing.
Oh, that's good.
Whatsoever. I refuse the.
You don't care if your videos get
not paying
demonetized.
me for editing.
You don't care if your videos get demonetized.
No, not really. I mean, kind of unusual that they are, you know.
I mean, they're so strict about their guidelines now.
Yeah. What do you mean my user password isn't incorrect?
You don't use you don't use your email. It's just the. You can use the email.
There we go. I have one of many zeros. Let's see if we can kill the first bank. Bank? Of lights. There we go. Okay. Cool. And we are recording? Awesome. All right. How in tarnation are you?
Tired.
Yeah. Oh, you know, terrible. I'd like to terrible. No more terrible than usual, though. You know. Yeah. I would like to deeply and profoundly apologize for having been out sick last week. I did end up taking a total of 4 days off, so every day except the Friday, and I was able to drag myself in. It was terrible. Just kind of just the common flu, though.
Would you recommend it?
If you had like diseases, you were ordering a disease, I wouldn't recommend that one. I'd go for more like a, common rhinovirus or something, something that you don't even, it's like, oh, I've got the sniffles, type thing. No, that was terrible. I didn't nearly die, but at points I felt like I was dying, so, but yeah, anyway. So this is kind of a strange coincidence, or a strange incidence. This is this is the beginning of the 3rd week, but also our first class ever, so hi, welcome. So the thing that we should kind of address the elephant in the room immediately. What the heck are we going to do to get caught up? So my plan at this point is to schedule a few basically online lecture type things. The way that I normally do this is using YouTube live streaming. I will of course post the links and everything, ahead of time, and you're welcome to come or not. It will be recorded, so if you can't make it to the stream, you can still watch the stream. And I'm, of course, happy to answer questions about the stream after the stream. So, yeah, basically. Any objections to that approach? It's probably pretty standard for these sorts of things. I'll let you know when I can get those scheduled in, but I'm thinking like sometime like Thursday afternoon, I might pop in for a couple hours. I'd like to try to avoid weekends, but I might do something this Saturday as well. From my calculation, we are missing 3 classes at the moment. The first week was designed to only have 1 class in it because the first 2 days are gone. But you guys just happen to be missing 2 because Sam Stott left, basically. You guys hear that Sam left?
Yeah.
Another prof, he got a full-time position at McMaster, and they somewhat abruptly and left a bunch of courses dangling, and the whole schedule had to be rescheduled, like, 3 days before term started. That's why that happened. Yeah.
So he's a traitor.
Yes, he's a traitor to the institution, and we should all spit on his name. In seriousness though, I wish him well. He's actually kind of stepping into a lot of the courses that I was teaching when I was teaching at the university last year. So I was helping him out a bit with the curriculum. Question?
Are you not teaching at Mac anymore?
No, I'm full-time here, my friend.
What about Intro to Python?
They're gonna have to, they're just gonna have to figure it out, man.
Who's in the college when fancy neat computers?
You're finally free of this.
You guys get to be these fancy neat computers now. Yeah.
You've freed yourself from the snake.
Yeah, honestly, the university not a great place to work if you like stability, mental health, or continual employment or benefits. So, anyway.
Also roast students probably. Annoying.
Oh my goodness, the students are so arrogant at the university. No, seriously, I was teaching a 3rd year class, and this one guy in the class literally would try to correct not only the things I was saying in class, but the way I was giving the class. I wanted to just drop the guy off of a cliff. It's like, you get an F. But no,
Sir,
unfortunately that type also tends to get good grades. Yeah.
he probably wants to call you back someone you created.
No. Who's the most arrogant person you can think? Trump in the making.
Yeah.
There we go.
I was gonna start splitting.
So.
You're a Trump? Oh, arrogant.
So.
I still go for my guy on rotate.
Let's talk a little bit about the course then. Welcome to the server side of the tracks. We have been studying a lot of languages. This class we will be learning yet another language. We are going to be learning PHP. Question.
I hate to ask this, but I feel like why learn PHP when there's so many other frameworks out there that would replace PHP?
The virus.
Why learn PHP when you got so many other frameworks? Decent question. There's no such thing as new languages. All the new languages are assuming the old languages as assumed knowledge that they construct themselves up with. So there is, an academic usefulness in learning older languages because they do inform the later ones. Second, PHP is still very popular, even though a lot of newer frameworks have come along. There's also, shall we say, a certain departmental resistance to adopting new languages. They basically have to supplant a language as being on the most popularly used charts in order to get it into the curriculum. They're only just now talking about TypeScript. Maybe we'll do something about putting TypeScript in the future, So it's still a very useful language. It, like, you know,
Yeah.
have I answered your question?
You answered my question.
Yeah. It's still a very good, useful, and interesting language to learn. And of course, the principles of server-side design which we learn will be applicable to any server-side language that we learn. The server is an interesting environment. On the client, you have but one choice. Just like in Lord of the Rings at the Council of Elrond, you have but one choice, right? And that is JavaScript, literally the worst language invented by humans, with the exception of Esperanto. Any Esperanto fans in the audience, I'm not being serious. I hate JavaScript way more. Python's bad too,
Python also.
but like, holy smoke, the stuff you can get away with in JavaScript, it's amazing.
Are we gonna do the funny object plus object equals object?
Yeah, we can do that, yeah.
At a later date, please.
Okay, alright. So basically, once you're on the server, you can actually program a server using any programming language. So long as you can write a program and execute that program from a command line interface, you know, we are going to be using Apache servers in this class because they are quite good and quite popular. And also that pleases me as a Linux person. You'll come to know this about me very quickly, but I am in the club of Penguin. But it doesn't actually necessarily, like, you could use literally any language, right? You could use C++, you could use Java, you could use J#, or F#, you could use bloody Haskell, you could use JavaScript for a unified approach. You could use the Java that you all love and hate from last year. All of these are valid approaches because with all of them, you can write code, get an executable, run that executable, right? But one of the things that sets PHP aside is that it was expressly designed for this purpose from the beginning, right? Unlike all of these other languages, PHP started its life as a server-side programming language. It is designed for it in ways that something like Java, like, it's not designed for server-side. It can do it because any general-purpose programming language can do anything, basically. But there are certain advantages to PHP. There are also conventions in PHP that are necessary for you to know to be conversant as web developers. So that's the sort of thing we're going to be studying in this class. Any questions? Yes?
The setup of PHP, because
Oh, we're going to be getting into it, don't worry. We are also going to be talking about some databasing stuff. We're not going to get too heavy into the databasing in this class, but a very important part of server-side programming is being able to access databases. No doubt. So we're going to do some databasing as well. Yes?
What's the market of PHP?
What's the market?
The dollar sign is that.
So, like, who in industry is using PHP? Is that your question? I don't know. You'd have to ask a more experienced prof. Sorry. So, basically, when it gets to the server side, there's a lot more choice available. So, different development houses are going to have their own stacks, right? PHP is in a lot of stacks, but it's often considered interchangeable for things like Perl, you know? But we're not doing Perl, we're doing Python. What? No, PHP. There are too many languages that start with P. Let's keep moving. So, Simon. So, before we get into any course content, it is useful for us to talk about our overall course policies. First and foremost, use of Copilot, AI tools, generative, predictive text. We all know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about ChatGPT. In this class, the use of AI tools is forbidden in this course, and evidence of its use will be treated as academic integrity violation, etc., etc. You are not permitted to submit code generated by ChatGPT in your assignments. You are to do your assignments the old-fashioned way, by hand, and using autocompletes in VS Code. Except not the ones that use AI, just the regular ones that just give you the function names. I know. Basically, this is the problem with using ChatGPT. Although it can be an extremely useful tool for a senior developer, the word we are hearing back from industry right now is that a senior developer in possession of ChatGPT can perform an equivalent workload to a team of junior developers. The problem is that you ain't senior developers, are you? Right? With possible rare exception, at which I would raise my eyebrow. None of you in this room currently possess a sufficient degree of programming skill to be able to intelligently read what ChatGPT is giving out to you, and by intelligently I mean critically, right? The problem is uncritical use of the AI's text, because the AI lies. It will sometimes not solve your problem, right? It will give you its best guess, and its best guess can be wrong. That wrong answer, if relayed without criticism or thought, can cause problems down the line. Basically, here's the problem, right? Here's the problem in metaphor. Let's imagine that you ran a bake shop, all right? And you wanted to offer your customers a new type of cake. You wanted to make them, what's the type of cake? Anybody? Sure. Tuxedo cake is more complicated than chocolate, so you win. Tuxedo cake. So let's say you've never actually heard of a tuxedo cake before, as I have not, and you wanted a recipe for how to make something, right? So let's say you find a recipe on the internet, perhaps you have a particular generative AI tool generate a recipe for you for this particular type of cake. You make it, and you serve it to a customer, and the customer returns to you saying, this tastes like burnt oranges and also petroleum. Why? You are a terrible person, and I want to personally destroy your bake shop. And then launches a social media campaign against you, gets your Google rating down to 2.3, and your bake shop, as a result, closes.
It sounded very, very specific. Not very personal.
Yes. So, the question is, whose fault is it that your bake shop closed?
Yeah.
It's the AI.
Incorrect.
It's the developer of the AI.
It's you.
Yes, I'm sure that if you sued, what's the bloody company called? OpenAI or
Elon
whatever.
Musk.
Yeah. Those people, if you tried suing them, what's a judge gonna say?
You used ChatGPT, you violated the rules.
No, he's gonna say, you're the one who served the cake to the customer. Right? You're the one who was responsible for the delivery of the product to the customer. The fact that the fact that the product contained flaws in it, put there by a thing that is not a person and cannot be sued,
The next few years will be personal.
right?
There was an AI that did sue us and won, or something.
Well, not in a court of law, I'm sure. That's, you catch the drift? You catch where I'm going? Just because the AI makes errors does not mean that you're not responsible for the errors that it makes. When you choose to use ChatGPT and when you choose to copy and paste it without reading it, you are assuming responsibility for all of the errors that it makes.
But it's not, can I add on something? So it's,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with using ChatGPT like to debug or to like see like, to like find an error for you, and then you do the programming.
My approved use of ChatGPT is as an advanced form of search engine.
Yeah.
Right? If you want to know, oh, how do I do X in PHP? And X, so long as X is constrained to not be the assignment, right? How do I open up a file for reading in PHP, right? How does floating point division work, etc. Yes?
You basically just use it as a form of Google that gives you one answer.
As opposed to Stack Overflow.
That's what I use.
Yeah.
It's Stack Overflow.
A lot of stuff goes through Stack Overflow, like there's a lot.
I mean, I don't know why anybody does anything.
You see senior developers destroying each other and calling each other dumb. That's the best part.
Yeah, no, like
Remember the review company?
they're terrible.
It's so fun.
All right. So, in addition, although PHP is an older language, the course content in this course is kept up to date with current best practices for PHP. This is generally true of all of the courses that we teach. If you're just Googling around, and this applies not only to using ChatGPT, but like just copy pasting off of, websites in general. Like, Stack Overflow has been around for quite some time now. I wouldn't be surprised if you could find answers on it that were 15 years old, right? The way that we programmed PHP 15 years ago is not the way that we program it today, although it's still the same language. Uncritical use of code found on the internet will also contain certain coding patterns which are deprecated or no longer favored. When I'm marking your work, I will be looking to make sure that you're using correct and current coding standards as given in the course material. Therefore, your first reference for how to do something should be the course materials or yours truly. Question?
I'm assuming also the documentation for the programming language as it's.
Yeah, PHP.net is also,
That's where you find the documentation before I get lost. PHP.net.
yeah, that's your general, yeah. So, in general, if I see a bunch of crazy stuff going on in your code that's like not even close to what we covered in class, I'm gonna be like, eyes narrowed in suspicion. And you don't want me to have suspicious eyes, because it's only when I have suspicious eyes that I start nailing people for academic dishonesty. that's the necessary prerequisite is this kind of smells funny. I don't know if this is authentic.
What if we cite where we got it from?
I would prefer that you wouldn't have to because you use course materials. But if you must, you must. Okay. So, speaking of academic integrity, congratulations on having made it through Java and JavaScript, two classes in which the number of people who cheat is relatively high. I'm hoping that you managed to make it through, either because you're not a cheater, or because you learned your lesson about cheating. I am hoping that this class will have a lower instance of cheating than we had in semester 2. It remains to be seen. I will be keeping constant vigilance. I expect you to be keeping constant vigilance as well. Has anybody at any point gone through with you folks the consequences, what the actual hard consequences are for academic integrity violations?
Suspension or expulsion.
Slap on the wrist.
The first time,
You get 3 strikes.
so the first time you get a 0, like if it's in a test or an exam or whatever, you just get automatic 0, which will end up having you to redo the course. Second time, if you do it the second time, it's taken up to the faculty. And the third time could lead to either suspension or expulsion, depending on the severity.
Yes. Depending on severity is the asterisk that gets put in there. But in general, a lot is kind of left to the discretion of the instructor. Me. It's under my discretion whether I want to pursue it as a first or a second level offense for the first offense. Level 1 is generally just resubmit and take out the cheating, please. That I only do that in cases where the cheating can be safely removed and you still have an assignment left, right? For example, if you submitted a web page and you had copied a paragraph off of Wikipedia, okay, you copied a paragraph off Wikipedia, take it out, and I'll mark it, sort of thing. In classes like this, where it's a lot more coding heavy, it's much more difficult for me to see that, when people tend to cheat, they tend to cheat on whole files, right? So there's sort of just a natural tendency for consequences to be harsher in coding classes. Late work policy. Y'all remember the late work policy from JavaScript? 10 late days, no more than 3 applied to any particular assignment. That one? That's the one we got here. So plan your semester accordingly. Good. So, yes.
Is there any policy that if you don't use any late days, they are included in the grade system?
If you don't do any which?
If you don't use any late days, they are added to your grading system.
Oh, no, any unused late days are not worth points. Yeah. So, let us speak then about the tests. Yeah. When I say databasing, I mean structured query language. So. Oh yes. Again, older technology, but unless you know SQL in one form or another, can you really call yourself a person who knows how to do a database? So first couple of weeks, the stuff that we missed is primarily language introduction type material. My goal is to have a Hello World up and running for you guys by the end of class today. We are going to see that as steps to a Hello World go, PHP has quite a few because we first have to set up a server, right? So, it's more fun than it sounds like. No, well, I'm having fun, and that's all that matters.
I said, I did that, during the summer.
Good, excellent, you'll have an advantage. So, so basically, let's talk about the assignments for a moment.
We're still gonna have to use Unix?
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Well, what do you think? What's the server?
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, right. This is server side. So we got 4 assignments and 10 late days. So you can actually use like close to all your late days on like. If you use 2 on each, you'd still have 2 left over, right? So, there you go. There's only 4 assignments, but this time we have a midterm. Yeah, so we've got 4 assignments, a midterm, and a final exam. The syllabus isn't like giving me how much each of those is worth, but at a guess, I'd say that the midterm's probably 15 or 20%, and then the exam is the rest of that. There is a policy, the exam must be passed to pass the course. I believe just the exam, but I'll double check with Mr. Adams.
Wait, 60% is the exam?
Exams, and it's counting the midterm as a midterm exam on the thing, so.
So 30, give or take.
I think it's probably gonna be 20-40 personally. I was going to check all of these details and then I just about died, so,
No pressure either way, still have to pass both.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you really should be shooting for doing awesome on both, so. But yeah, they are going to be paper-based tests. So, normally, that means the questions aren't as hard. Yes?
So, I guess since you said that it's paper-based, is it gonna be theory as well? A little bit of theory and maybe some code-based?
Yeah, you can expect a mix of theory and coding-based questions.
Okay.
I've never seen
Like an
Mr.
actual,
Adams put together a test, so I don't know what his like tests look like.
his final for JavaScript last year was, it was lockdown browser, so we weren't making a program. But it was more like, okay, maybe, what would this code, like design this?
Yeah. I think you can probably expect
For the
like
final last year.
weighting that kind of falls in line with what you've seen in the program so far. Theory will probably not be the majority of the marks on the test, because come on, this is a college, right? Yeah. Good. Any questions about any of that at this time? Yes.
If we are enrolled in like the section where we have class Monday and Tuesday, and you're teaching another section that teaches, I think, Tuesday and Friday, can we come into one of your classes on one of the sections and then the other class in the other section?
No, if you're in this section, you must test in this section.
Text.
Yeah.
But otherwise,
For attending, just general class attendance, yeah, sure, I don't mind at all if you swap classes, yeah. I am teaching another section, by the way. It is on Wednesdays and Fridays, Wednesdays at 1 p.m. and Fridays at noon. If you want to come by that one, if it works better for your schedule, absolutely. And if you're from another section, just keep in mind, I'm only responsible for marking the people who are supposed to be here. So you need to go to your home section to write your test. Okay? Otherwise, you're free to be here. I love people, so just be here. Absolutely. Good. Any other questions? Okay, good. All right, let's do some learning then. So, before we get to a hello world, we have to remind ourselves of certain key technologies, how things work in a web environment. So, it should come as no surprise that a web application is composed of code in more than one place. The web application spreads itself across both the client and the server, communication being managed between these two halves. The print is so tiny. Oh man, I'm sorry, give me a second. Can you read this in the back now? Good. There we go. So, just to remind ourselves, when the user requests a web page, they enter in a URL. That URL is packaged into an HTTP packet that is sent off across the infrastructure that is the internet, which we largely don't have to worry about because we are not in the networking stream. Those packets are received by a server. The server serves that request, processes that request, and returns a packet if, a request is required. This will often contain content, including a web page. Subsequent requests will then be made. In our examples that we had from client side, here's a question. Was the CSS loaded at the same time as the HTML? No. Why?
Well, isn't the CS just a different platform?
CSS is a different file. Yes?
So it reads things as you go to the top to bottom, so you can read it at the start of the page before the HTML and vice versa.
Right. So the way that we organized things in client side, we would request an HTML page. That HTML page would then have a line in it linking to a CSS file. Because HTML pages are read top to bottom and processed as you read them, the CSS file is requested from the server at the point where that inclusion of the CSS file is found in the HTML file. So the HTML file must be loaded first, right? And then when this name, the question that the computer may have for you, the programmer, you want me to load a CSS file. Okay, what's the file name? Where is the file name stored? In the HTML file. So you gotta get that one first. Same thing with JavaScript in it when it's off in its own file, right? So this is kind of, this is the client-server relationship, right? And this is to also throw in AJAX requests, right? Asynchronous requests, packets that don't reload the page, right? So, basically, we have a client, right, which has a user interaction, which creates an HTTP request. The server retrieves the file which has been requested. It determines whether or not it's a script and whether or not it needs to be executed. If it is a script, then it runs the script. Otherwise, it simply retrieves the resource and pops it back to the client. When a CSS file is requested from the server is smart enough to know that a CSS file is not a program. It is information the server, or the client is requesting. So it just takes the file and kicks it out to the client. Now, here's the difference. Now that we're talking about PHP, PHP is a scripting language. PHP files can be retrieved like other files. Why would you though? You can't run the code on the client, right? You can only run JavaScript on the client. When a PHP file is requested, that is a runnable script that we wish to execute on the server, right? That's why this is called server-side, right? So that's what we're going to be learning how to do in this class. It's important to understand this because it's important to understand when this stuff takes place, right? The script is run on the server before the packet is sent to the client. So, everything that the PHP script does to the data that it sends happens absolutely first. PHP executes before any JavaScript, right? Make sense? So, does everybody remember how to look at the contents of a packet using the inspector in a browser? You guys remember that? Inspect. Network,
Oh,
right?
yeah, I'm sorry, correct.
Yeah. Otherwise, I don't actually have any packets.
Not sure how to run.
Yeah. So, you'll notice the first thing we're doing is loading a document. But, you know, we've got lots and lots of resources being loaded from the server here. Many, many requests, right? And it even tells you how much time they're taking. We can see some of these are fetch quests, or fetch requests, not fetch quests. What am I talking about? Right? But yeah, so this is the way you see all your server traffic, right? These are all the packets that are sent by the client and received, and like, these are registered when they're sent from the client and when a packet is received from the server. We can take a look at various portions of the request, like is it a get or a post? We talked about get versus post in client side. In this one, we're going to talk about a couple more different request types later on in the course. Right now, we're just getting a feel for the overall how things work. There There you go. So, you can see what server this is coming from, Amazon S3. So, we might conclude that Canvas is using Amazon Web Services, right? Good. So that's how you look up these packets. So, because we are now concerned with the interaction between the client and the server, these are no longer academic concerns. We now actually need to know what the data packets being passed around are and be able to diagnose problems with them, right? Things getting routed to the wrong place. A lot of the time, you'll be sitting there frustrated. Oh, my thing isn't working. Why isn't it working? My code must be wrong. And it's like, nope, you're like not requesting it properly, or you're not using the right type of request or the right parameter, right? You have to, like, you no longer have one point of failure, right? In Java, you always had one point of failure, your Java file. Now, you need to be on top of what both the client and the server are doing. Good. So, what is PHP used for? Dynamic content generation. Taking interactions from the user, working that somehow into web pages, and being able to return those web pages back to the client. A lot of the stuff we're going to see in like the opening weeks, opening lessons of this class, it's going to be like, oh well, I could have just done that with JavaScript. Like, why PHP even? So the useful and important part about a server is that you can store stuff on a server, right? You can put files on a server. You can put a database on a server. It's true. If all you're using PHP for is dynamically modifying the content of a web page, you're not doing it right. That's what JavaScript is for, right? But storing information which is common to all users of a website, right? Which might need to be might change while the person has the website open, for example. Think social media feeds, right? Social media feeds that like pop your new I don't know, if they're still calling them tweets.
Feed notifications?
Feed notifications. That's so clunky.
Are you referencing like just the pop-ups you get from any social media app that might be like,
Sure.
oh, this person has uploaded this?
Yeah, like
Feed notifications.
for well, I was actually making a joke about how Twitter was recently renamed.
Oh, it's an X.
Yes. The platform formerly known as.
The platform formerly known as Twitter, yeah. I don't know if like you call what you used to call tweets, you now call X's or something.
It's still called tweets.
They're still called tweets. Well, it's still like the URL hasn't changed either, right?
No.
Anyway, you guys are like, are you aware to any degree what the actual structure of Twitter is? Like, how does it work?
No, but I know they're getting sued.
So, yes.
Is it a, can't remember the name for the database type, it's like a NoSQL
Yeah.
style database?
Yeah, it's a NoSQL style database, probably MongoDB or something
Yeah.
similar. But basically, so this is what happens, right? When you X an X, when you tweet a tweet, that tweet goes into the big database of tweets, right? And then all that your feed is a filtering of that database for the people you follow, right? It's we call that a view of the database, right? So if the database changes while you've got your page up, right? The page is sending a request periodically to check for updated, check for more, right? If one has appeared since the last time it was checked that's in your view, it sends that along, loads it into the page, right? But the database itself is of course shared between all Twitter users, right? Even though you don't see the entirety of the Twitter database at any given time, because oh my goodness,
Jesus.
yeah. In theory, you could if you went through and followed every single person on Twitter, right? You have access to all of them, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the kind of thing we're talking about here, right? We're starting to talk about the real stuff, the stuff that you could maybe even like, you know, be a tech entrepreneur with if you have like a clever idea. Okay, good. Waterfall. So let's talk about web applications. The web application is a combination of code on the client side and code on the server side. Both packaged together, we call that a web application. You have probably heard the terms front-end and back-end developer. Front-end developers work on front-end technologies, quote unquote. Back-end developers work on back-end technologies. These are also known as stacks, technology stacks. The front-end stack, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Your entire first year at this wonderful institution. In addition, any frameworks or libraries, packages that you use to make things easier and more beautiful.
Bootstrap.
Yeah. Bootstrap I would put in this last point as a framework that we're using. Even though like it's a content delivery network with a bunch of like
It does have its framework.
oh, there you go. Cool.
You even use, I think, JavaScript with Bootstrap.
Neat. Yeah. So back-end stacks then. Server-side language. Again, server-side, you can use any language you want, actually. Well, you use whatever language your boss wants. But in theory, you can use any language. Popular ones include PHP, snake language, Ruby, also Perl, although that's kind of an interesting relationship, Node.js, and other sorts of things. So, relationship between Perl and Ruby. How many people have heard of Perl? How many people have heard of Ruby? So Ruby is actually the designed successor language to Perl. The way that you get from Ruby to Perl is if you take a look at Perl as a birthstone, the next month the birthstone is Ruby, and that's where the name came from. Oh, yeah, no. Blood rubies? No. So, you also have a selection of back-end frameworks. Express.js, Django, again for dreaded snake language, Laravel for PHP. I believe that we will be learning Laravel in later semesters. Pre-built systems and modules to simplify back-end development. You will find that it becomes complicated after a certain level of complexity. You will want to move away from just doing PHP scripts for everything reasonably quickly, but in the same way that like doing your own vanilla JS development is necessary to understand how the development works and to integrate with the frameworks, you have to cut your teeth on a certain amount of PHP before you can usefully use any of these. Yes?
Apache is a backend framework,
Apache is a server.
Oh, it is a server, okay.
Yeah. So we also have database systems, MySQL, PostgreSQL, MongoDB, and SQLite. We'll be talking about databases later on in the course. Basically, anything with SQL in it is a relational database. Relational databases functions reasonably similarly to Excel spreadsheets with multiple sheets, except they're accessed with a command line interface that looks a lot like a programming language and actually can be used as a programming language, but it's unlikely that we'll use it for that because why on earth would you want to do proper programming in SQL? It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, in addition, backend stack includes your server environment, including one of a few exotic operating systems, right? These are operating systems that you're unlikely to have used before, although you may have used similar ones. Number one is Apache. CS Unix is an Apache server. Can anybody tell me what Apache is a variant of? What operating system?
Linux?
Linux, that's right. Apache is a Linux server. Thus solidifying Linux's position as the best operating system. The best operating system is a family of operating systems. A dysfunctional family of operating systems. You also have Nginx, or Nginx, perhaps. Another Unix/Linux-based version. Basically, you can take like literally any Linux distribution and make a server out of it if you really want to as well. So, but they all function reasonably similarly. And then you also have Microsoft. Is this like LLS or IIS? IIS. Can I call it twos? Microsoft twos. Anyway. So, I've been trying. It's just the reconstruction crew left a bunch of like pipes and bags of concrete around. I'm just trying to clear them out. Yeah, so one of the things about server-side development is that intelligent use of your operating system can greatly improve your ability to use the server, right? We are going to be using an Apache server. Apache is Linux-based. Where are my Linux people at? Come on, hey. Okay, that counts. Linux, hey, yeah.
Linux to run on Raspberry Pi,
That most certainly counts. So, learning a little bit of Linux can go a long way because there are certain operations which are just easier in Bash. So, in Linux, the command line interface that you use is called Bash, it's BASH, the Born Again shell. Extremely powerful interface, highly employable skill. Waggles eyebrows. So, and anybody care to take a guess what a full stack developer does? Does both. Yep, good, awesome, you all passed the exam. Lovely. I'm being facetious. Probably some of you will fail. Just statistically, some of you will probably fail. So, when we talk about back-end stacks, we often use acronyms to refer to them. The stack that we will be working on is the LAMP stack. So it's Linux, Apache, MySQL, and then PHP, although Python or Perl can also be in there. Other alternatives are the MEAN stack, MongoDB, Express.js, Angular, and Node.js, reasonably popular. The MERN stack, which replaces Angular for React, and depending on like, yeah, it's company dependent. Basically, you are being given the base set of skills. Once you get out into industry, the company that you work for will use one of these stacks and probably only one of these stacks. You will be learning to, you will either adapt quickly or slightly less quickly depending on which stack they use. I've got a question in the back. Yes?
Is there any particular reason these stacks are grouped in the way they are? Like, does MySQL not work with, like, say, React as well? Like,
In theory, all of the components are separable, right? But like that question kind of gets to like, well, how were these decided in the first place that this should be the one, right? Long years of experience by industry veterans, culture and like magazine articles that get published, and marketing materials from people who develop frameworks and stuff. Like, to explain how these come into existence, you'd have to explain the entirety of the web development system, community, everything. I don't have room for it in my tiny brain, so do some reading, right? Each one of these will probably have a Wikipedia page with a history article that you can read, right? So, good.
Sorry, just one question. Like, I
Yes, sir.
noticed that, because we're gonna be doing co-op, like,
Yeah.
a lot of companies say, like, there are requirements, that it puts the, what they call it, Node.js, Angular, like, you must have the skills, like, the understanding of this, framework. But the problem is that we don't really cover it here, so I don't see it being covered. So how is that one for you?
Well, part of the problem with that is that we start you guys off with intro Python, assuming you know absolutely nothing, right? Like, we've only been able to get you guys, like, I know it doesn't necessarily feel like it, because you guys have been, like, through a gauntlet for the last year learning programming languages, but you still know very little, right? A lot of these more advanced frameworks are going to require more advanced knowledge still and more experience. So, like, it's like, to some extent, like, we could, do 3 weeks introduction to, like, Angular or something, and then you can put it on your resume, and like, you still know very little about how to actually use it. You get to your interview, they discover that you actually know very little about how to use it, and then you don't get the job anyway. So like, although the skills are more basic and it doesn't necessarily help you with the filtering step, I understand.
Yeah.
The skills that we teach you, we're teaching you to a sufficient depth that you could actually stand on your 2 feet in an interview on, like, if an interviewer were to talk to you about Java, I hope that you would be able to perform well, right?
Yeah.
So, but let's just say that your concerns have been noted, and I'll bring it up at the staff meeting next week, okay? Alright.
Sir,
Yes,
but for Java, we were only taught like the core part of Java.
yes.
So on the base of the core part of that, we will be able to get a job related to Java language.
Well, depends on where, but like, you should be able to handle interview questions.
Because the thing is, most of here are like high school graduates,
Yeah.
and then we are learning Python and codes. But the job description requires like experience, or like we should know this language, that languages. But we,
Yeah.
5 years of experience.
I mean, like, I can't.
But you need to look for like
I
a
can't
junior
just like wave my
person.
wand and give you 5 years experience,
Like,
you know?
we have a co-op course going along, but they are asking like you need to put any references on your resume.
Yeah.
Like we don't have that much experience.
Well, if I may say so, you're really just boned because you're young. Like there's no way around it, you know, it's like you just don't have that much experience because you're not that old, you know? There's no way, there's only really one way to get the experience, and that's to like keep plugging away at it. And like I know that it's competitive to get these co-op positions, but like
Or build a time machine.
yeah, basically, like I mean, like you can't. There are certain things you can do to mitigate it, but like I also need to continue the lesson because I promised you guys a hello world today. So, very quickly, software development life cycle. Always define your requirements before you define your design, and always design your design before you start typing. Right? Do your prep work. That's all I'm gonna say. Also, test a lot. Oh, one thing. No matter how well you think your program runs in a web context, right? No matter how thoroughly you've tested, always, 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 always be sure to test it on a live server, and the same server that you're going to be deploying on, because different servers are slightly different. Sometimes it will work, sometimes it will not. You need to know. You need to test. Boom. Okay. All right. Let's talk about development environments. So, when creating server-side applications, you have to fire packets off in order to test that those packets are working, right? You need, it is necessary to have something approximating a server to work on. It shouldn't be the actual production server, though. The production server will typically be public-facing. So, some rando on the internet could load your website, during the months that you're going to be working on it. They get a broken website, your company gets a bad review, and everyone dies. The end. So what you want is a environment which simulates a server without actually being the server. This could be a different server, perhaps on your company's intranet instead of the internet. Do you guys know the difference between intranet and internet? Yeah. So the intranet is like inside the organization. The internet is external, global. Good example, the military has an intranet that is not permitted to interact with the internet. In fact, my wife's in the Navy. If you take any USB device that's not like an official military USB device, and you plug it into a USB slot on anything that's military equipment, literally it sends out a signal to the actual military police, and they come find you wherever you are, and you get arrested. Yeah.
Was this before the person on Discord posted all the military secrets online?
Well, probably. U.S. or Canadian?
U.S.
Oh, there you go.
Was it the War Thunder situation?
He posted, plus it was bragging on a server that it works with the military, so they posted
it's not the
Oh, see, there's nothing you can ever do about a malicious actor who's got codes, right? But anyway, so the question is, how do we go about producing an environment that we can work with on our computer? Preferably, we could set this up without even having to use the internet. Enter what are essentially server emulators, although they are actually using your computer's networking infrastructure. We've got XAMPP and we've got WAMP. I am going to recommend and use XAMPP through all of this because basically WAMP is like a Windows, and you know how we were using LAMP, right? Apache, MySQL, and then PHP, AMP. The W stands for Windows, whereas in XAMPP, the X stands for all operating systems. So, XAMPP only if you're on Mac or Linux, right? And since there might be a couple of you with Macs in the crowd, I'm just going to go with XAMPP, and it works fine, so, yeah. Yeah. XAMPP is cross-platform. XAMPP also works on Windows. Yeah. So, very good. So this is what it's doing, right? Let's consider what your I should be doing it over here. Let's consider what your computer actually is doing, right? This is your computer, Compy 9000. Then you have in there browser, for example, right? Inside of your computer you have networking infrastructure, right? This networking infrastructure communicates either by wireless radio waves or by landline sneaky cables to the internet. At which point, the signals are picked up by some server and sent back, right? So, the browser sends its HTTP packets to the networking infrastructure to be routed. Normally, they go out, they come back in through the networking infrastructure and back to the browser, right? Here's the difference when you're running XAMPP. I'm going to use a different color. Aha! Your browser creates the HTTP packet in the same manner, sends it to the same networking infrastructure, but instead of being bounced out to the network, it is reflected back into the computer and sent to XAMPP. XAMPP then processes your HTTP packet the same way that a remote server would process that HTTP packet. It then creates its response packet, sends it back to the networking infrastructure, which routes that packet back to the browser. And the browser receives it and processes it in the normal way. Right? So, because it's contained and running on your own computer, there is no requirement that the packet actually at any point go out onto the internet. Make sense? Good. So, let's run it. Use a custom which? Just use localhost. So, I would like everybody, please, to load up Mohawk Apps and perform the ridiculous, redundant, double login step. What?
I can't stand the Microsoft Authenticator as well.
That's only if you're away from the campus now, the campus.
It's not even just that, but also when I'm on
But I wasn't
campus
sure
as
if
well.
he reset it.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
You're not connected to Wi-Fi, right?
Yeah, but he's got the notes
Like
there.
the Mohawk Dash Wi-Fi.
No.
Okay, so I can still use
No,
files.
Actually, you can spoof a FileZilla server too.
Huh. I have too many applications.
No, the computer is actually, yeah, or, I mean, I know it's more complicated, but
I mean, this is like the whole
I'm
thing.
just curious.
I mean, in theory, I guess, yeah. I don't know, I'm not actually that hip to that technology. I've only used, VMs for like basic stuff. Like pretending I have Windows when I use Linux.
I use them for targets.
Alright. So, alright everybody. You need XAMPP. If you have your own local system, you can download it from the website. Just make sure you're getting the version of PHP that's used in this class. The version of PHP which is used in this class is 7.2.24. This actually matters. Make sure it's a version 7 thing if you're going to download your own. Okay? Hopefully you guys are far enough along now that I don't have to worry too much about version numbers with you guys. So, boom. The XAMPP control panel. From this, we can launch locally running instances of servers, accessible only to us. You'll notice a few options: Apache, MySQL, FileZilla, Mercury, and Tomcat. If you click Start on Apache, it will start her up. Windows Defender Firewall, blah, 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 cancel. That'll be fine. You don't have administrative privileges anyways, but it doesn't actually block anything necessary, so there you go. Now, there's an important part here. We need to understand the concept of a port number. Just the concept, all right? So this networking infrastructure that I was talking about here, the way that it works, visual metaphor. How many people live in an apartment building? How many people have been to a post office where you have all of the banks of doors?
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of similar, like maybe you're living in a part of the city that has like one of those standy-uppy post boxes as well with all the doors. So, I want, the best way to think of it is like a post office, because it's literally, like on one side it's all doors, and on the other side it's just a guy sticking envelopes in numbered slots, right? So, basically, right, the networking infrastructure is a great big grid of these cubby holes. Each one has a number, and processes, such as this running Apache server instance, are taking letters and sticking them into various numbered holes in the big wall, right? Other processes are coming along and looking specifically in their slot to see if anybody left them something, right? They see it, they pull it out, they read it, it's like, oh, you want that? Okay, I can fetch that for you. And then he pulls out like, you know, goofy meme.png and crams that into the, you know, into the packet, et cetera, et cetera. So the trick here
Maybe LED.
is that the standard ports used for internet communication are going to be used by standard internet communication. Just because we have an Apache server running on this thing now does not mean that we have disconnected from the internet. We can still access all of the regular internet traffic, right? But it's telling us what ports it's using, right? Telling us right there. And we're going to need that information to be able to get, to tell the client, to tell the browser which port the server is using so that they can exchange messages. Make sense? Good. So, let's, this works better in Firefox, so use Firefox for this, please. There are a couple of ways of accessing this. There's a special IP address which is linked to the locally running server instance. But the easy to remember way of doing it is to type local host. Don't worry about, just accept the risk and continue.
Wait, hold on, local.
So,
Don't worry about it.
for some of you, this will have worked. For some of you, this will not have worked. If this did not work, if just typing localhost did not work,
Local host?
localhost. 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 All lowercase. If this didn't work, what it means is that the Apache server is not using one of the ports that the browser is configured to look at by default. So, we have to tell it which ports to look for. The way you do that in a URL is by using the colon character. Oh, dashboard, okay. So, the /dashboard here actually was automatically put in when I accessed localhost. Basically, the XAMPP homepage redirects to this dashboard subdirectory. But other than that, it works the same way as CSE does. Make sense? Yeah. So,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
what you have to do, take a look at XAMPP, take a look at what your ports are, and type them in. So I'm going to start with the second one. I find the second one usually works out better. So, in this case, I'm using port 1080. So you can say localhost : 1080. And, oh, maybe the other one then. 443. There we go. One of the two of them should work.
480.
Oh, it'll be different for everyone, right? Or it may be different for everyone anyway.
So like I don't have
Yeah.
that it's not the port, but yeah, I don't have the like the welcome to Apache. I'm getting the warning potential.
Click advanced.
Oh, just click through. It's just telling us the certificate is invalid, but
Go through.
we don't care.
Click advanced, scroll down, continue.
Yeah.
Just
Did everybody manage to get this?
It's just the certificate on the website isn't coming back as valid.
Oh, just click off that. That doesn't matter.
It's the same reason why Windows doesn't fit when you download an exe if it's not signed, because it doesn't know who it's from, it doesn't know if it's a virus or not.
Oh. Well, that's still not.
MSI licenses, certificates that were leaked.
Can't connect to it, it's running.
Like it was the second one. I don't know if it's happened yet, but Annie's certificate has been like pretty much totally eventually, so.
You are roughly
Mal
ruined my.
official.
No, I was he's like. Oh, it's an issue, not
Stop the server, start the server again.
Remember when Mike actually fell asleep?
Yeah, I heard you snore. I did before, I heard one.
You did your whole JavaScript assignments that day, and you didn't get any sleep.
It just redirects the packet to that port specifically. It's like,
Yeah, see,
and there.
I downloaded later.
Okay,
I need to,
so,
I need to downgrade.
okay, we have a working server instance, everything's cool. Yeah. Our next problem, of course, we should find some way to develop files for this thing, right? Yes?
Normally, when you install it on your personal system, it does ask you to do some changes on your, is it UHC? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, you need user account control to
Yeah.
install anything. Once it's running though, it's not necessary, so. Yeah, like here it asked me to verify with UAC, I said no and it's still working fine.
Okay.
Yeah. So. Basically, the way that XAMPP works, it takes one file directory on your hard drive and it treats that the same way that CS Unix treats your user home directory on CS Unix. So any files that you, not your user home directory, your public HTML directory. Any files that you sneak in there will be displayed by the server. Make sense? Good. In our case, it's called htdocs. So open up your file browser, access your hard drive, Windows C. Yes?
If you're using XAMPP, it's got the Explorer button. Just
Oh, yeah.
so real quick.
Okay. So it does. But I'm still showing it the whole way. Yeah. XAMPP gets installed to the root directory of your hard drive. You go in there, you go to htdocs, boom, and there it is, folks. Yes, index.php.
Can we just click that?
Another way of getting there, from XAMPP, you can click Explorer. It will give you the XAMPP directory. You can get to htdocs from there. So, I'm going to be a madman and delete the entire directory.
Why?
Just because it's like default stuff given to you by XAMPP. It's not actually like necessary in any way.
Can we delete it?
Yes, and it's also destruction is fun. So, let's load up VS Code, folks.
So technically, I think it has.
They made it because nobody, like, who codes in Visual Studio?
Our .NET programmers
This is for coding.
For our JavaScript professor?
Yeah. Oh, God. All right. So make me an HTML page. Call it index.html. Remember that your standard Apache requirements HTML will apply. Index must be lowercase. Yeah. Yeah, I just want to show that you can put an HTML file up.
But are you putting this with the,
Put this in the htdocs folder. So Windows, XAMPP, htdocs,
Shortcut.
index
Exclamation.
file, boom. Boilerplate, boom.
oh my god.
Jesus Christ,
Yeah, this is just an HTML
I mean, I
page.
have it, Mike.
I'm
but it's
just showing you
it
that
feels
you
like
can
it's
put a
that
file
big
on this virtual server.
I just saving in the HTML.
Save it in the htdocs directory and make sure it's named index.html with a lowercase I. And this is a web page. Title is Huzzah.
So just in the HT docs, that's it?
Yep, just plunk it in htdocs.
Is it working for me? No, I get that.
You have to delete dashboard and input index.html.
Oh, let's see here.
Oh, that's fun. That's weird. Mine works.
Oh, no, I'm still at / dashboard. The directory number no longer exists. Yeah, there you go. You have to go right back to localhost. You can't look for a missing directory.
Wait,
Yeah.
so mine is like the Windows XAMPP. I guess it's because I put it in that file. So.
Hmm.
But can I still put it in a different location on my?
Yeah, sure. If you want to make a subdirectory and put it in the subdirectory, that's fine too. You just have to, like, this is a URL, right? Like, you have to pick the subdirectory that you put the file in. Otherwise,
Like, can I store it on a regular folder, like in my HD drive, and would it still work?
no. The copy that this is pulling from must be in that htdocs folder. You can back it up somewhere. Absolutely.
Can I copy that HD docs folder?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a file, it's just a bunch of files on your file system. So, the advantage here is you do not need to upload things through complicated mechanisms like FileZilla or WinSCP. You can just directly modify files on your file system because they're just files on your file system. Question?
Sorry, could you that send the business group to delete these other files?
You can if you want. I did.
Nothing happens.
Yeah, just delete it all and throw in your index page. Make sense? Good.
Sir?
Still not working? Yeah. Awesome. No, just all of it except the one you made. All of it except the one. Yeah, except everything else.
I think you trust the person that doesn't exist.
Oh, you have to.
Yeah.
You have to select a project.
So you're telling me I downloaded all this for what?
Did you have a question?
The life server for me is like.
Just do on the body.
Yeah.
Things just equal.
I wish there's a way I could delete all that garbage, like.
You can do this name on your Apple.
Yeah, but I have 700 pieces.
I think I managed to
I still have 700.
I'll figure it out.
Yeah, you have.
That's a lot. All right. Okay. So far, so good, but we haven't actually done any PHP programming, and we only got 14 minutes left in class. So, here's the thing. Excuse me. Thank you. That's still a lot of whispering back there. I know we're like a long way away from each other, but I can still hear you. All right. So, let's make a new folder. New folder. Call this PHP example. And into this folder, let's make a new file. Call it hello.php. Just hello. There we go. IntelliFence. Oh, I get it now. It's the IntelliFence.
What was the folder name?
Terrible. Like the name of the extension for PHP that VS Code is using is called IntelliFence, and I just got it that it's like the reason that it's a purple elephant is because it's IntelliFent, right? Yeah, it's terrible. Horrible. All right. So, PHP, how to write, is language much like Python because you don't have to wrap things in all kinds of classes and stuff like in Java, right? You can just kind of start programming with it. But, in order for the computer to know that it is PHP code, you have to open a PHP tag. Yeah, PHP. Boom. Then you close your PHP tag. Everything between these tags is PHP code. So now we'll see if anybody's been reading ahead while I was singing. Yeah, there we go. Dollar signs everywhere. So, we do not use print. We do not use console.log or console.debug. We do not use system.out.println. We use echo. Echo. Echo.
Yes, Michael.
You know what I did last night? I tried to write this assignment, I put a semicolon at the end of my sentence.
So, semicolons required.
That's our curious.
So, you may be asking yourself, why on earth would this be echo? Like, why? Why?
It's,
Yeah,
it's faster than print.
yes.
Probably any programmer is worried about how long people work.
So, like, you remember how I said Linux is a useful thing to know? Echo is the bash command for echoing information back into the console. So if I'm not going to open up a console because it'll take too long, but if you had one and you said echo hi, the next line would print hi. That's what the echo command does. That command is picked up by PHP. You'll find that PHP borrows quite a few of its conventions from bash scripting, which again is an extremely useful and employable thing to know about. So, to load and run this script, we can do the following. We actually don't need to use a full AJAX request. remember the name of the folder that you gave, type that in PHP example, and then the name of your PHP script, hello.php. Ta-da! Hello world.
Or you can use the PHP server.
Hmm?
The PHP server, I don't know what it calls, VS Code, the extension.
You could just use a school server.
I mean,
There's a million ways you could do it.
there's a million ways to do everything. Yes. So, within my PHP docs folder, I made a folder called PHP example. I made a PHP source code file called hello. This is the contents of the file, right? Then, Gesundheit. I had localhost, right? Then you just type in the full path to that file, PHP example, and hello.php, press enter. It requests the resource. So, what is going on here? The resource is requested from the server. The server determines that it is a PHP script, probably by the file extension, runs that script, and then outputs it. And that's a hello world for you. Cool? Yes, I can show you the code again. Yes?
Or did you spell everything correctly?
Oh, you still, you got rid of the dash.
Oh, I should open control.
So, I'd like to, at this point, give you like a motivational example. Some of you who had me for client side will have already seen this example, but since it's like actually a fair, this is a fairly new crowd. I haven't had a lot of you, so I'll show you honor system tic-tac-toe. So, I encourage everyone to visit this URL, csunix.mohawkcollege.ca/tilde with 2 O's where did I put it again? I think it was in winter 2023 /Ajax examples /example 6. Yeah, there we go. I'll blow it up. There you go. Can you see that at the back? Good. So, this is what's going on. Let's take a look at the network traffic. So basically, what's happening here, everybody is logged in to the same page, and everybody, if you're interacting with the tic-tac-toe game at all, what you're doing is basically just sending some Ajax requests, which are linked up to a few PHP scripts. You select play as X or play as O. Clicking on any of the boxes sends a request to send a move to that box, and then you can reset the game. Anybody can reset the game at any time. This is honor system tic-tac-toe because there are basically no rules aside from the fact that you can't put something where something already is, but that's the only thing. On the server, the way this operates, there is one file which is being read, right? If I click here with X, the PHP script is sent parameters, similarly to assignment 5 from client side, saying, first column, second row, X, send move, right? If that, so that PHP script loads the file, checks that spot, sees it's vacant, puts the X in, and then sends the updated board state. Also, there's an interval timer running here in JavaScript, which is sending an AJAX request every half second to request the updated game state. That's why when you click O in the middle, everyone else can see it too, because in this case the database is just a file that contains one X and O game. Right? But yeah, so this is what you can use PHP for.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions? I think that's a kind of cool example. But yeah, that's like the basic idea, right? You have a set of commonly held data, right? Various people are interacting with it in various ways. That is server-side. Server-side programming is managing the access to the commonly held data, right? Until we start talking about that, we're literally not talking about anything that couldn't be done with JavaScript, right? So, that being said, to get us up to this point, we're going to have to talk about how to do stuff the same way you do JavaScript. For a few lessons, we're going to be talking about basic stuff like how strings work, which is a little bit junky. But yeah. Any questions? Yes.
I need help with loading my hello.php file on.
Okay. Class is just about over, so I'll see you in when class ends. Question?
If I run a wall with a constant resistance support, if I leverage because there's no safety.
Yeah. In this case, there's no timeouts on how long it should take.
Can I try and break it?
If you want, yeah. Just take, if you wouldn't mind, stop your trying to break it, when the class ends. So that
How is there an undefined?
Sorry.
What? Where?
It just disappeared.
I don't see any
So wait, are multiple?
It'll be in
are
the
multiple people
source code here.
Yeah, I'm looking at the source code.
Let me see here. Oh no, JavaScript they don't.
Well, I was just
You know what?
I'm multiple
If,
people
I'll-
using this at the same time.
If you go to the
People using this at the same time.
No, the network. No, network.
Not network, sorry.
If you go to network, then click on the Ajax. Yes.
Oh, there we go.
Let's go to the source.
You're talking about this?
Oh, there we go.
Everything else.
Yeah, so it is a whole server and everybody sending a request by one click and it is running simultaneously.
Like I'm looking through and I'm not seeing any settings.
And if you click, you'll see your
Right there.
address.
Oh,
Right at the bottom.
oh, okay, I didn't.
Oh, and it's every quarter second.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Other side keeps on going.
Yeah. So are there any questions? This is gonna be a fun class. Matt? Okay. Don't worry, we'll get caught up. Certainly, by the time the midterm comes around, we'll be caught up. I might beg for an extension for us for the first assignment.
Please do so.
Already posted, but, we'll get there, don't worry. I know that my tonsils screwed everyone in this room. I take responsibility for my tonsils.
Sleep don't time me, right?
I will make sure that you have ample opportunity to perform your.
Why is
Okay? Alright, class dismissed, get out of here.
Don't get trouble by that, bro.
Michael, honestly, if the class gets too boring, I'm walking away.
If I just set up VS Code for the set up just because it's got GitHub and I can make a repo, do it on my desktop.
Yeah, I use the school OneDrive. Is that all you have?
But my experience with OneDrive is it's slow to get. And I've had issues with it just not working. So. Besides, my software doesn't have that.
On Thursdays, 4 to 7.
Oh, is it the, what do you call it, the bros? Like the calculation for the bros?
Yeah, I just, cause whatever I wrote on your thing, I'm not getting my
Trying to figure out, like, I'm trying to remember how to parse the value from.
It's JSON string, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
There's that's what
There it
PHP
is.
thinks there is.
Yeah, like I could do,
Is that the same thing?
I don't know. But again, we're trying to get a response for a text or like a promise for a text.
What do you call it,
I'm just going to be a constant.
As long as it's static.
Yeah.
So I can get the text there.
We gotta get out of here.
So yeah.
No,
It's a weird one,
like
but-
last year.
I can't I didn't like the AJAX request.
Yeah.
He didn't explain it. Like that, so it was just kind of like right press and go get your response. Everybody left.